All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are digging into one of the biggest, most important questions in all of education. It's something that every teacher, parent, and administrator has thought about.
I mean, think about it. You hear a million different arguments, right? Do we need smaller class sizes? Is it more homework? Or maybe less homework? It feels like everybody has an opinion. But what if? What if we could just cut through all of that noise and look at the actual data?
And no, that is not a typo. 80 million students. One researcher, Professor John Hattie, took on this unbelievable task of combining decades and decades of research to create a definitive, evidence-based list of what truly makes a difference in the classroom.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll talk a little more about Hattie's massive study itself. Then, we'll get to the good stuff, the top 5 biggest game changers. After that, we'll look at the common thread that ties them all together, bust a few myths about some surprisingly low-impact factors, and finally, we'll land on the real takeaway from all this.
So this is the man himself, Professor John Hattie. And he wasn't interested in just asking the old question of what works. He wanted to ask a much, much better question: what works best?
So how on earth did he do it? Well, he used a super powerful tool called a meta-analysis. Basically, instead of running one more small study, he decided to analyze the results of thousands of existing studies. We're talking about synthesizing over 1,600 meta-analyses, which covered a whopping 256 different influences on student learning. It is just a staggering amount of data.
And to compare all these different things, everything from phonics to school uniforms, on the exact same scale, he used something called an effect size. You can just think of it as a universal measuring stick for impact. It doesn't just tell you if something works, it tells you how well it works. A bigger number means a bigger impact. Simple as that. Now this number here is probably the most important concept in all of Hattie's work: 0.40. He calls this the hinge point. Why? Because it represents the average effect a student gets from just 1 year of being in school. So anything with an effect size above 0.40 is actually accelerating learning. But anything below it, well, it's having less impact than a student just showing up for class for a year.
And this chart really shows the problem perfectly. See that curve? Almost everything we do in education, something like 95% of it, has some kind of positive effect. And that's why everyone thinks their pet project or favorite strategy works, because technically it probably does, a little. But the key, the entire point of Hattie's work, is to ignore the tiny effects and focus our time, energy, and money on the things that are way over on the right side of that graph, the things with a huge impact.
Okay, so that brings us to the main event. After sifting through data on 256 different factors, what did Hattie find at the very, very top of the list? What are the absolute biggest game changers we have?
Here you go. Just look at those effect sizes. Number 1 is collective teacher efficacy with an effect size of 1.57. That is mind-blowing. It's almost 4 times the impact of an average school year. Then you have things like self-reported grades and teacher estimates of achievement right behind it. These aren't just good ideas. The data shows they are massive, powerful accelerators for learning.
So seeing the list is one thing, but the real genius here is figuring out why. What do these top 5 things actually have in common? What's the secret sauce?
Well, the common theme that Hattie found is something he calls visibility. Think about it. Collective teacher efficacy. That's the shared belief, the perception that teachers have the power to make a real difference. Self-reported grades. That's about students having a clear, accurate view of where they are. It's all about making the learning process crystal clear, visible to both the teacher and the student. It's about feedback, evaluation, and understanding your impact.
And Hattie just sums it up perfectly right here. Visible teaching and learning occurs when teachers see learning through the eyes of students and help them become their own teachers. Wow, the goal isn't just for the teacher to know what's happening, it's to make everything so clear that the students themselves can see their own path and start to take charge of it.
All right, now for the part that might be a little controversial. Let's look at the other end of the list. If those are the things with the highest impact, what about some of the things we spend so much time and money on?
Just look at this chart. It says it all. On the far left, you've got the skyscraper of collective teacher efficacy, way up at 1.57. In the middle is our hinge point, 0.40. And then look all the way to the right. That's reducing class size. Its effect size is just 0.21. Yes, it's positive, but it's way, way below the average effect of just 1 year of school. The data just doesn't back it up as a major game changer.
And there are more surprises where that came from. Here are 3 things that have an effect size so small, it's basically zero. The whole debate about open versus traditional classrooms, an effect size of 0.01. Giving students more control over their own learning, just 0.02. And what about having multiple grades or ages in one class? Only 0.04. These are things we can spend years arguing about, but the data says they barely move the needle at all.
So, we've seen the very top of the list and the very bottom. What does this all add up to? What is the real lesson we should be taking away from Hattie's incredible work?
I think it's this. The really big levers, the things that create the most learning, aren't about changing the building or buying new tech or shrinking class sizes. It's about changing the mindset. It's about building a culture where teachers believe they are agents of change, where goals are clear, and where everyone, teachers and students, is constantly thinking about and evaluating the impact of what they're doing.
And so that leaves us with a final, really powerful question to think about. When you look at this evidence, at what truly works best, it kind of forces you to rethink everything. If your school or even your own classroom decided to focus only on what the data shows has the highest impact, what would be the very first thing that would have to change? Something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me.